Welcome to the 7 Investing Podcast. I'm Dan Klein, and joining me today is Daniel Anstandig, the CEO and co-founder of Futuri, an innovative company focusing on enhancing the effectiveness of media through an enterprise tech platform. Daniel, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Great to meet you, Dan.
All right, so I just did the intro, and I said a bunch of nonsense about enterprise tech platform. Can you explain what you're trying to accomplish with Futuri? What does it do? How does it do it? Don't give away any trade secrets, just the top line here.
All right. Well, we provide software for TV, radio, and digital publishers to help them grow their content, audience, and revenue. And what I mean by that is that today there is AI, there's software that you can use that will help you to create content that better aligns with your audience. There's software that you can use to reach an audience more efficiently and to make it onto more platforms faster in real time. And there's software that you can use to drive revenue growth. And so across Futuri, we provide content, audience, and revenue solutions for broadcasters large and small in all kinds of markets, digital publishers who may have a unique niche where they're talking about one specific topic, or broader digital publishers that are covering more of a full spectrum of topics.
So take me through your background a little bit and how you decided to create this company, because obviously there's a lot of content out there. Like we're sitting here on a show, and I'd love to say 10 million people are going to see this, but it's not. It's going to be like tens of thousands of people, not tens of millions. So this is obviously a topic I care about. Where did you come from, and how did you get to here?
Okay, well, so I started as a young entrepreneur in technology and in media. My first tech startup was actually when I was 14 years old. I started an ad insertion company, audio ad insertion, that I eventually sold to Microsoft when I was 18. And then I went to work for traditional media companies, helping them to grow their digital audience and revenue strategies. But this company was started based on the experience that I had in those boardrooms where really the question that came to mind for me was, what if social, mobile, AI now, the internet, were all invented before media? And we function in a world where media was invented 100 years ago, or in the case of newspapers, goes all the way back to Benjamin Franklin. And now we're using technology to try to reform how we operate. But instead, if we thought about social, mobile, AI, et cetera, coming before media, we would think differently about everything, from content to audience, revenue, even HR, and the way that we recruit and coach talent. So in my early 20s, I was consulting for mainstream media companies on their digital revenue and their audience strategies. And I came to recognize that this is an industry, media is an industry with multi-generational momentum. You have TV dating back to the 50s, radio back to the 1920s, newspaper, back to the Benjamin Franklin era, and all of these media companies in each of the various kind of sectors in media are all adjusting processes and systems and audience and revenue philosophies that have been in place for generations. So this what if question led to new possibilities. And today we work with thousands of TV, radio, and digital publishers around the world to help them use AI to power their content and audience and revenue. I'll give you kind of an illustration of some of the things that we do. So we have a system called Topline, as an example, that helps sales teams using AI to take all of the data about their audience and automatically create the right presentations or the right data-driven marketing stories that help sales teams to match the right brand or buyer with the right broadcast brand and audience. For content creators like yourself, we have a system called Topic Pulse that automatically takes real-time information from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and over 100,000 news sources, and then uses AI to predict what's going to trend in a local market or with a specific audience based on early signals that we're just starting to observe now early on when a topic just starts to trend. And that's used by newsrooms and content creators around the world to understand what their audience cares about in real time, and then ultimately to create content that's going to engage that audience.
So let me ask the crusty old, I started in print media. I was a trade magazine editor. I was a longtime newspaper editor. And I'll say I've come up against it in both directions, that I had bosses who wanted me to do things that, in my opinion, were, I don't want to say selling out, but were at least pandering. And I had stories I wanted to do that my bosses thought weren't the right stories. And I'll say things like, covering like the Cub Scout Awards dinner when you run a small town newspaper, in my opinion, moves the needle. In my boss's opinion, no, go cover a car wreck. So how do you balance that? How do you balance the sort of like, if right now you told me what today's, we're taping on a Wednesday, we do a live show at noon, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If you told me what I should talk about, it's probably Robinhood stock. And the reality is, I don't want to talk about that because it's not reaching the right audience. It's not reaching the sort of long-term investor. How do you balance the sort of human intuition with the computer spitting out, okay, this is where the most interest lies?
Well, you bring up a really good question. And look, I don't think that you should just cover what the largest potential audience cares about. It should be what your audience cares about. And that's where AI can be helpful. And all the examples that you just shared actually underscore why AI can be helpful in a news discovery or news reporting process. Because at the end of the day, it's not about talking to all of the people, it's about talking to the people who matter. And just like anything, I think you can use these tools to a fault. SEO, as an example. We were talking briefly about SEO, you and I, just before we started recording here. And I think SEO can be used to a tremendous fault at in media organizations. It's the philosophy, for those of you who aren't necessarily familiar with this, is that if you look at the keywords that are most likely to drive traffic right now, and you incorporate those keywords into your story or into your reporting, you're more likely to drive more traffic. Well, yeah, if you hang raw steaks out in your yard, you're more likely to attract wolves. I mean, but it doesn't mean that that's what you want. So just like spell check is a tool in a journalist's arsenal, so is AI, or this type of technology. It's incredibly useful. And I think that, to your question about the human versus technology balance, there is a place where robots and AI have a certain value proposition in the cycle of story discovery and news reporting, and a place where humans can't be replaced. So I'll kind of give you an illustration here of a typical trending story or topic on social media. The way that we would look at it, having observed millions of trending topics now over the last 10 years, is that every topic goes through three phases. You have a breaking opportunity, an angle opportunity, and then a diminishing return. And the breaking opportunity is when a story just starts to trend and you have the who, what, when, and where. This is like the very early part of a story just starting to catch on. And this is where you have the basics, who, what, when, and where, related to an event or a certain topic. But then the angle opportunity, that second phase, is the how and the why. And that is the part that AI can kind of point you maybe in the right direction on different angles that are starting to emerge. But ultimately, the how and the why is where humans relate to humans, where we make sense of what's just happened, or where we make sense of what we think is going to happen, and we talk about why we should care about the topic. And then the third phase, diminishing return, is where we've all just heard about it enough. We've all come to our own conclusions. And at this point, we're just wasting hot air talking about the same thing over and over again. But if you watch the news, you'll see clearly where there are certain organizations that are really good at drilling into that second phase, that angle opportunity. And then there are others that just live on the very end of the cycle. And, unfortunately, they waste a lot of airtime talking about or contemplating things that the audience has already moved on from. And we see that in the data every single day.
How widespread are tools like yours being used? Because again, I program a show 3 times a week, and I would love to have the data in my hand saying, hey, here are the topics that are cresting right now, that are going to bring the most interest. And I'd love to be able to pick which ones of those. What worries me is, at a lot of places I've worked, there'd be 3 levels of bosses over me going, oh, good, he should just talk about this topic all the time, this time, bring it home, do it this way. That's kind of the part that concerns me. So how widespread is this? And are you giving sort of advice to your clients about, hey, look, this is a tool. I like the spell check analogy. And we talked a little bit, I know I'm going on long with this question here. We talked a little bit about SEO, and SEO can be a wonderful tool. It can also be a terrible way for the ad side of the equation to really ruin good journalism. So long question, I know, but sort of like, what's the way you shape this when you sell it? And is this being used everywhere and I just didn't know about it?
It's becoming incredibly widespread, yes, and it is used at assignment desks in newsrooms with individual content creators. We should get you into topic, Paul, Stan. The technology is really helpful as a tool to surface and discover stories. I think in terms of the, looking at those three phases of a story or of a trend, it's an incredibly noisy, congested news and information environment out there every hour. Fun fact, did you know that the average trend only lasts for 4 to 6 hours? The average viral trend only lasts 4 to 6 hours. So the dirty little secret in media and in, even for bloggers and podcasters is that by the time you decide that you're going to talk about something, it's already so far in the rear view mirror. Your audience knows about it. They've talked about it. They've shared it with their friends. And you are like way back in a time machine somewhere, back in the past. And not you personally, Dan, but, many content creators. And so it becomes more and more important, especially when you have a production cycle or you have more time between the time that you're recording or the time that you're creating content and the time that the audience consumes it. There's a predictive kind of value that starts to emerge, where when you can understand what's going to be important to your audience beyond 4 to 6 hours from now, you can create content that is going to be better aligned. And so that's where Topic Pulse and where our technology has been used more and more is around predictive topics. And it is more widespread than you would imagine. And I'm glad to hear actually that that's a bit of a surprise to you, being a professional journalist and being in the media community for the last 25 years, that you don't feel like, oh gosh, this is the kind of thing that's everywhere, because we're not trying to create or advocate for homogenized news where we all just follow the same big, brightest topic or biggest carrot down the road. It's about what really matters to your audience and then being able to drill into that in the right period of time with the right type of content.
So I did see some of this roughly a decade ago, back when I worked at the Boston Globe. And then a little bit after that, I worked at Microsoft and I was curating stories. And there was always this effort to automate that, which they've now done. And I will argue they've done terribly. It doesn't, you go to MSN and you can tell a robot picked the story. You can tell it's not a human picking the photos. But I would assume with your tool, and we'd love to try your tool, because the reality is a lot of days, you're right, I'm flying blind. And I'll give a good example. We talked about the Square purchase of Afterpay on Monday's show. Mm-hmm. And that was the perfect timing of a story that broke on Sunday night, a time where even FinTwit isn't all that active. And then we did a live show about it at noon. So it was the absolute, zeitgeist point. So I could see how likely your technology would have told me to do that. The reality is it's very rare that it's that obvious what we should be covering. So, I'd like to use that sort of tool. My question is, so are you also factoring in what the potential audience is? Because obviously CNN doing a story or CNBC is going after a different audience than Seven Investing, where we have both a more sophisticated investor that understands long-term trading, but also the person who wants that. And maybe we're not as interested in the person who cares about what Jim Cramer is screaming about in any moment. So how do you factor in, like, I don't need to reach everybody. I need to reach the people who might become a subscriber. How are you factoring that in?
Well, we can follow the audience of a particular brand or a general audience in a local market. So in the case of your site and Seven Investing, we would be thinking about who your followers are, and we would be tracking your followers and saying, in your community, this is what your community cares about right now. And might also be looking at other, similar communities of more sophisticated investors and tracking what they care about and then predicting what's going to go viral based on early signals that we're seeing in social trends. Also, there's more and more tracking of passive consumption of content. Early on, we would look at how many comments or likes or shares a particular story or topic might be getting. And now more and more we'll look at passive analytics related to a story. So are you engaging with it, but you're not necessarily adding a comment or sharing or liking it and so on and so forth, retweeting. The more that we can see your behavior and your engagement with a topic, the more we can predict what similar people like you are likely to think about, or whether you're likely to lean in when you see this type of topic or something similar.
So clearly, this is the future. It's frankly more the present than I realized. But we're going to wrap up a little bit here, but I wanted to ask a question that I think is going to lead to a few minutes of discussion here. we've seen pretty massive growth in programmatic advertising. For those of you who don't know, programmatic advertising is sort of automated advertising that matches ads to the right content. It's pretty much everywhere that advertising exists. It's why if my wife and I are discussing buying a new sofa, all of a sudden I see sofa ads everywhere. That's a very unsophisticated use of it. But are we now moving into a world where we're going to have programmatic content where we're hitting that right balance of this is what the audience wants and this is what advertisers want?
Oh yeah, it's already happening. There's more programmatic AI generated content out there than most people realize. And you know, your audience is probably a bit more attuned to it, would have an antenna for it a bit more than a typical consumer, I think. But many of us have consumed AI generated content and don't even know it. The humans the humans who are creating content still have a different voice than the robots that are creating content. But knowing that, to answer your question, knowing that humans are the consumers we're targeting, I still believe that humans have to craft and shape and deliver the story in a way that relates to other people. And AI is perfect for surfacing content, measuring its appeal, helping to separate the signal from the noise. You know, I think about it the same way that I might think about algorithmic trading or algorithmic surfacing of opportunities in the market. You're still going to, you know, think about and have a conscious, you know, hand on the wheel around what you're trading. But there may be ways to surface opportunities or to identify, you know, momentary windows that you can take advantage of in the market. And I think that in news, it's very much the same. Ultimately, humans, though, in journalism are going to bring the magnetism that attracts consumers over and over again. And AI cannot do that elegantly today. It's possible in the future, but ironically, would require a lot of training from humans. I will tell you this, though. AI, I think that, you know, in the case of news, and I think there's certainly a parallel in the money management and investing world. AI can help to organize our world and help to make predictions and help us to kind of parse out what really matters and what doesn't matter, what is just an aberration. Case in point, back to the media industry, podcasts. There are 2.3 million podcasts today. And according to Apple's podcast industry insights, I just read that there was something like 55 million episodes, total episodes in feeds. Well, with thousands of new episodes released every day, it's incredibly difficult for recommendation engines and platforms that serve podcasts to make sense of all this content because of the disparate and scattered nature of their metadata. So, as an example around AI, around how AI can help to solve that problem, we just announced today a new AI product called Admatic that helps podcast platforms to sort through podcast content, automatically generating metadata and chapter markers and ad insertion points, keywords related to content. Now, can a human sit there and do that? Yeah, with 54 million podcast episodes, I, I'm doing the math. That's going to take the next 300 years of a room of about 1,000 people. So ultimately, you know, AI can help us to address things that are better, you know, better time spent for AI, and frees up organizations to spend less time and resources on things that a machine can replicate and more time on the things that only humans can do, the things that are critical for our future. In news, topic polls cannot replace investigative reporting. We can't replace that local connection. When you talked about, you know, covering the local, you know, baseball game, heck yeah, that's a great example of local journalism that breaks through, that's going to add to the community. Human interest with a real heart. Can't do that with AI. You can surface a lot of content, but ultimately it's going to be surfaced to somebody who can be discerning and work through the signals that they're getting and then make decisions based on that. And I think there are certainly parallels between, and I'm not surprised to see that you have a media background doing what you're doing, and hearing some of your commentary around investing, because I certainly see the parallel between using AI in the financial, you know, technology world and using it in the media technology world and marketing for that matter. It's all how you use it, and it certainly can be used to a fault and can be oversimplified. And you know, your example with SEO is just perfect about how we can walk the plank and follow, you know, follow the one tactic, the one thing that we know, you know, off the end of the earth. when you are using it in the right place, in the right part of the process, I think that makes all the difference.
Yeah, it's a question of, who's in charge. And in a lot of places, it's not the news editor in charge. And look, the news editor is often a person who's stuck in his ways and isn't willing to change or use technology. But, when we talk about SEO, which is search engine optimization, for those of you who don't know, and it's
Yes.
basically telling you, use these words in your article and more people will see it. And that's great when you can do it organically. So you mentioned, but it's not great when it's forced. And I think we see this. You mentioned being able to recognize AI created content. So I'm going to say I've become pretty good at recognizing what I'll call AI assisted content. I use
Yeah.
Facebook news a lot for like my surface news, for Olympics coverage, for sports, for just things I just want to like glance at for 30 seconds. And after a while, I can see that headline was really well crafted, but the story doesn't deliver. And I think in the long
Yeah.
term, even pretty unsophisticated people get that. So that to me is where the balance between human and robot, where it's like, all right, do I want to maximize getting this dollar today, or do I want to make sure I collect dimes for a really long time? But you mentioned recommendation engines. And I actually think this is the biggest failure we have. I don't want to say as a society, because obviously we have other large problems as a society. But when I log into Netflix or Amazon or whatever, they do a terrible job. Facebook News does an okay job because I've spent an enormous amount of time saying, no, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want that. Hey, just because I clicked on this one story about heavy metal doesn't mean I want heavy metal. It just meant I was interested in that story. Do you think you can fix that? Because there's so much television. There are so many podcasts. I'm on, by the way, like 8% of those podcasts. If you go through that X amount millions of, no, I'm kidding, but it's a lot of them. Do you think that's something you can meaningfully fix? Because look, if Amazon can't tell me what books to read based on knowing every book I've read for the last 12 years, I'm a little skeptical that anyone's going to figure this one out.
Well, and you should be. I think it's a huge problem to solve, and it's not something that any one of us can singularly address. But I do think that we can develop better AI to understand the content that you are consuming, why you're consuming that content, and how frequently you're consuming that content, and that there are a lot of nuances that we haven't considered in recommendation engines to date. So the first step is to understand the content that you're actually consuming. And that is the biggest problem. If you talk to any data scientist in this space, they will tell you that just wrangling the data around your content, not even what you used or what you or how often you came back and so on and so forth, that's kind of a separate next stage problem. The first is which content are you, what is the content that you're consuming? And why did you go there? What is in that content? And not just keywords or sentiment, but was there a certain context to it? Was there a certain topicality or reason that you went there that day? Is there more nuanced information about that content that we can understand? Did it have multiple voices? Is there a particular type of music or other copyrighted material in that content that attracted you to it? Were you actually searching for something else, but this content was optimized? Speaking of SEO, because SEO has cluttered up the metaverse with all kinds of crap. So, can we understand exactly what this content is? That's stage one. The next part is your interaction with it, how frequently you came back to it, why you were there. And then the next stage is what other people like you were doing and making correlations. And, we're still very early. AI is still, in its very early stages in terms of applications around recommendation engines and intent for use and intent for consumption, the way that we think about recommendation engines today. I have no doubt that 5 years from now, you will have a completely different experience opening up Netflix or YouTube, for that matter, or any other major content platform, because it is a problem that everybody is working on solving. And there's a lot of modeling being done around trying to figure out exactly what you, Dan, want, and then what you and your family have in common, and so on and so forth, so that you can start to understand who else is in the household and how to better serve you and your family in creating the right recommendations at the right time. Part of what you also experience, and part of the issue in these recommendation engines, is that, yeah, they know every book you've purchased over time, but they don't know really how frequently you've gone back to that book unless you're a adamant, dyed in the wool Kindle user. They don't know whether you were using it in context with something else. Was it a momentary project? Did you give the book away? Was it a gift? So you can see that there are dimensions to understanding your own consumption that AI and algorithms can only solve for to a certain extent, given the information that they have. But it will get better.
I don't want to pick on Amazon, but if I've read every book in a series, or at least purchased every book in a series, perhaps you should tell me that the next book has come out. And from a
that's a big giveaway.
Yeah, from a television point of view, I don't think we've progressed that much from my first TiVo 15 years ago, where the first thing I programmed in was record The Simpsons, and it said, "Oh, would you also want to watch the Flintstones and the Jetsons?" Well, no, those are just cartoon families. There's nothing. So I see the opportunity. I'm very excited for what you're doing, because I like why you're doing it. Like it's not that sort of crass, like let's just make as much money in the short term as we can. What do you see the future of your company? Do you see it, going to an Amazon, going to a Netflix, and sort of be helping with those recommendations, and being something that news organizations use? I mean, it seems like you've really tapped into a gigantic market here.
Well, thank you for saying that. And our dream is to continue to help to organize and monetize the world's content. And so wherever that journey leads us as a team, I started this company 12 years ago as an angel-funded, bootstrapped company in Cleveland, Ohio. We're still in Cleveland. Come visit us sometime. Today, we have over 100 people in our company, with half with backgrounds in data science and engineering, and half in business and media. And every day we talk about ways to grow content, audience, and revenue for media companies. And our definition of a media company is not just NBC, CBS, ABC, and so on and so forth, CNBC, Bloomberg. Our definition of a media company is any brand that is attracting and wants to retain an audience. And more today, there are brands well outside of what we would think of as media who are trying to use content to go engage audiences and ultimately to drive revenue around that. So we see our mission as being a really big one that we're all really passionate about, and absolutely would love to continue to serve the YouTubes and Netflixes of the world around helping to make content more discoverable, monetizable, easier to understand, and ultimately help to create better alignment between what communities want and what media organizations are creating and serving to those communities, because that's ultimately what gets us out of bed in the morning, and what we're really passionate about.
It's a mission that's near and dear to my heart, because obviously there are shows you do because you want to do them, but the vast majority of the shows I try to deliver are thinking, what does my audience want? And now sometimes I can ask that question. We're lucky enough on one level that we're very connected to our user base on Twitter, but that doesn't help me grow the user base. So if I find, okay, my audience really, really wants to talk about, Robinhood's results, and that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about CVS, Lyft, and Kroger, probably three companies nobody wants to talk about that I just think I have an interesting angle on. Well, how do we connect that topic to the audience? Is it the right topic? Am I wrong? Should I not be doing it? And all of that information I do think is very valuable. I'm really excited to see where you go. Maybe we'll do this again, in 6 months, or I'm sure you'll be out there on the trade show circuit, as will I, soon enough as the world gets back to normal. For those of you watching, I hope you didn't find this too insider, too wonky. I wanted to sort of give you the behind the kitchen look at this. The reality is that most of the news you consume, most of the entertainment you consume, isn't being done on this pure, J. Jonah Jameson is saying, get me more pictures of Spider-Man, that there's a lot going on in the back. Because look, I worked at newspapers and people thought the editor told me what to do. And the reality is the editor at the Boston Globe was someone I saw twice. Even my day-to-day editor wasn't particularly connected to what I was doing in terms of what I thought. That stories are actually largely generated at the writer level at most places. So how these sort of tools are being used, how this impacts all of our lives. When you turn on the local news, this isn't just like, again, just some guy making decisions. There's a lot of corporate things, there's a lot of data. So I love the idea that that data can be, I don't want to say impassionate, but when it's AI powered, it's not tinged by what we believe. And in some ways, that can be used to back up what I'm thinking. Like I always pushed for more service journalism. Like, hey, people want to know like how to balance their checkbook or how to, get fit in 30 days or whatever it is. And that is not something newspapers do. So my boss has always hated it. I would have loved to be able to show, hey, look, here's the data. On the other hand, I'm not sure I would have loved when they showed me the data. So this is all going to be very exciting. It's a conversation I want to continue. Daniel Anstandig, we appreciate you doing this. Thank you for being part of the 7 Investing podcast here.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure talking with you. And yes, would love to get together at a trade show soon.
Yeah, I am very much looking forward to that world. I'm actually going to a trade show in a couple of weeks that I was like, hey, I have the week free. Let's Google what trade shows are happening. And I happened to match myself to an event where T-Mobile, one of my favorite companies, is not from an investing point of view, from a consumer point of view. Just always have to be clear because people go out and buy shares based on me saying that, where they're keynoting and being part of it. So I'm like, oh, hey, I'll go to that. Not what I would do in a normal year. This has been the 7 Investing podcast. We are 7 Investing, empowering you to invest in your future.